Let's take a closer look at the Black Series 6-inch figure of clone Captain Rex from the Bad Batch.
Varykino, living the Star Wars life.
Hello there, and thanks for visiting the Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to take a closer look at and unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of clone Captain Rex from the animated series The Bad Batch. Now that we are up to the third and sadly final season of The Bad Batch, I'm celebrating this awesome animated show by going through and finally opening up my collection of 6-inch Black Series figures of characters from the show. Sadly, this one did not hit store shelves for us here in New Zealand. I had to source this one internationally, but I'm very, very happy to be able to add him to my collection. Captain Rex is such an iconic character, and this version from the Bad Batch has some really interesting elements. We've got all sorts of weathering and an interesting soft goods element that I think is going to look really, really cool when we get him out of the box. So I'm going to take a closer look at the packaging and then we'll get him out. So we've got a sort of classic modern Black Series box here with the large window and the angled side panel with art. For the Bad Batch series, we have this dark red sort of burgundy color stripe here, which is a little bit hard to read under certain lights. We can see the series here. It says Star Wars The Bad Batch, and then the character name is Clone Captain Rex, which is a little bit hard to read. A little bit easier if you catch it in the light because it is gloss against a matte black background there. We can see all of those really cool details of the figure there. Can't wait to get him out. On the side, we have cool artwork as usual. We have Captain Rex with his helmet on and his visor down, holding a clone blaster pistol here, and then it trails off into that dark accent color, which does make the text on the side a little harder to read here, but it does say Clone Captain Rex in black font there. Bit hard to see, but it always does look really cool to have these all lined up on your shelf. Turning round to the back, the color stripe shows that this is 06 from the Bad Batch series of Black Series figures. We have a bit of a repeat of that art there, looking really cool, and we have a little bit of a blurb about the character here. Clone Captain Rex served the Republic during the Clone Wars. He viewed military service as an honor, and he always completed his mission. So, no spoilers for the Bad Batch series there, just a little bit about the character. But of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, you will know Captain Rex. We have a lot of the copyright, warning text, all of that sort of standard stuff on the bottom and the lower half here. A little bit of a side window, so we get some light there into the figure from the side, and a little bit of a window at the top, which allows just a little bit more light to display the figure, because I do recognize how cool they look in their packaging. But personally for me, I am a out-of-box collector, except for some rare instances. So now's the time. Let's get him out of the box and check out all of these fabulous details. Now I have Clone Captain Rex out of the packaging, and this is exciting. I can already see a lot of details. So of course, we're going to go through the painting, the articulation, the accessories, and of course, some of the features that might be a little bit hidden. Some of the Bad Batch characters are packaged with their helmet separately beside the figure, so you can see the face sculpt. But for Captain Rex here, he was packaged with his helmet on. So if you're looking at the store, you can't see the face underneath. So I'm very, very keen to check that out. And I don't know how possibly removable this soft goods component is, but we're going to try and sort of peel it back and look at some of the details underneath. Of course, because you can't see too much underneath, we're going to take a look at the paint job. I like to be a little bit particular about paint job and just tidiness of figures when I spot them in store shelves. As I mentioned earlier, I had to import this one overseas, so what arrived is what I got, so I wasn't able to pick and choose. So I'm very keen to take a closer look at all of the painted details. We have a lot of weathering going on here, and of course Rex himself has some very unique paint schemes and details there to go over, so lots to check out in person. So let's get stuck into it. So of course Usually I kind of look over the body, but I really want to start with the head here. I did have to slightly adjust his feet. He did come out of the box a little bit wonky. I'm going to play around with his legs a little bit and see if I can find a steady standing position. But for now, I'm just going to bend him a little bit forward so we can take a closer look at the helmet. So of course, with this, I can even see it starting to come off. I was actually kind of surprised. Some of the helmets are sort of rubbery so that they slip on and off over the face with ease. This one, if I just kind of give it a squeeze, is fairly robust. It's not nearly squishy like some of the other helmets are, which is kind of interesting. Perhaps because we have more paint here and they're not wanting to sort of flex the paint, but also we have another extra component here. We have a visor and a rangefinder, which I'm hoping, based on the box art, we can move over the front lens. So let's take a closer look. Okay, it's got a little bit of a stiffness to that, but it did come down fairly easily, and we can move the rangefinder independently as well. So we can display the helmet like it appeared in the box art with that down over the main sort of eyepiece there. That looks really cool, and that's nice to know. It's a little bit tight when we get to this point, and then it slides back up. You can just kind of see light through there at the back, so there's just a little bit of breathing room when it's up in that top position. And if I move it all the way back, we can take a closer look at some of the details. Obviously, Rex has a lot. Because this is the Bad Batch set after the Clone Wars animated series, we have the Clone Trooper helmet that Rex wears in the latter Clone Wars. So he's kind of got this reforged piece here. We've got this really interesting sort of silver seaming, where he has forged the two sort of different Clone Trooper helmets together. He's got sort of more of the Phase 1 classic Attack of the Clones one here, but the mouthpiece from the later ones like we see in Revenge of the Sith. Very, very cool. We've got some tiny hash marks here across the top. That's really, really small. We've got some tube stripes here. We've got some weathering going on the faceplate. Tiny silver teeth here, silver details on the grill. There's just so much going on here. More hash marks, tube stripes. We've got some blue details and that black stripe on that moving piece there. And of course, we've got his classic Rex design here on his helmet. There's a lot going on here, and I have to say, pretty happy with the paint job. Nothing looks like it's really sort of smudged or gone over the wrong place. Pretty tidy there, and we've sort of got some weathering elements. The blue is like deliberately scratched. This isn't sort of, damage to the figure. We've got this really minimal sort of scratching and weathering. Overall, that is a really cool piece. It's a little bit harder to tell when we've got so much going on with the rest of this figure in terms of this fabric component sort of bulking out his body. To how sort of good and sort of in scale the helmet is, because I know sometimes the fitting over helmets do look a little bit oversized because of just the width of the plastic that has to fit over the sculpted head. But let's take a closer look at the face sculpt for this. Now, of course, he is pretty much a regular clone, not like the Bad Batch with slightly different facial features. So we've got a pretty good likeness here of Django / Clone Trooper performer Temuera Morrison, just with that iconic Captain Rex blonde haircut here. I think that is a really good face. We've got some very tidy paintwork going on. Nothing looks out of place. We've got good eyes, good sort of matching up along the hairline there as well. That's really, really cool. Of course, I couldn't see that in the box, but we've got a tiny little bit of like extra plastic on this ear. You can just make it out here. It feels like a sharp point to my finger, and you might just be able to see it against the hood there, but this ear is fine. But honestly, that is such a minor little thing. It's just like a little bit of extra plastic in the sculpting there. But again, I'm probably going to display this figure with the helmet on. I think the helmet is just so iconically Rex. I'm going to have it on display, but still nice paint job. Nothing that I'm like, oh, that's a shame. So it looks like we've got some stitching here that's holding the cape closed over the torso. So I don't know that I really want to snip that open. Oftentimes if there's a stitch there, it's to hold things in place, like with robes and capes and things like that. And sometimes if you snip that off, it can look quite disheveled. I'm not really that keen to snip that. That looks like there's actually quite a bit of stitching there to hold that in place. So I'm going to be very careful lifting it up because I don't want to damage that stitch work. But taking a closer look at the soft goods itself, there's so much detail here. It's got a lot of printing and a lot of patterning. Like even in these sections, we can see we've got this mottled printing. Hopefully that is showing up on camera. We've got these stripes. We've got this sort of paler design coming in here. We've got the different color for the cowl and the hood going on, which is attached at the back. That is stitched down to it. So the hood is not a separate piece. And it's also stitched down here at the front as well. There are some stitches here. So there is a lot of actual construction work going into this. A lot of soft good components are very simple skirts and cloaks. There is a lot going on here. And on the back, we've got a little bit of a cut in here matching up with those lines, and you can see that mottled printing effect. That does look like this is completely printed. It doesn't look like a painted effect that's been sprayed on or applied to the fabric. That looks like that is fully stitched in here. And we've got some interesting, we've got his classic sort of blue elements under here. This one's a little bit kinked because it's been sort of folded up, but there is a blue painted edging to his fabric components underneath. So might need to sort of straighten those out with time. They might just be sort of a little bit permanently kinked because the paint itself has sort of creased a bit hard in these areas and here. But I'm probably not going to see that too much, especially if I wear his cloak down. But if you kind of pull it back, you can see there from the front. The front sections aren't too bad. Got a little bit of a wrinkle going on here and there from this side. It's not too bad if you want to display it back, because if I just tweak it a little bit, we've got some plastic holsters here, which I'm hoping to test his blaster pistols in. Let's check out the other side. Yep, we've got the same thing. Coming down from the belt, we can see that there is a top slot, so hopefully those will fit in there. To be honest, I'm probably going to pose him with his weapons in his hands, but it is fun that they include sort of functioning holsters here. So I'm definitely going to check those out. And this is a little bit rubbery and flexible coming off the belt, as these things tend to do. So you can kind of maneuver it and get accessories in and out. But that is going to be a little bit of a tight fit, getting the blaster pistols in and out up under those robes there. But yeah, there's so much fun detail going on here. And I want to see what he looks like with the hood up. We've got a little bit of stitching going on around the face as well. So there's some stitching here, which is kind of holding the hood in place. So I can kind of tuck that under. And I can, because it's stitched and gathered at the back, it doesn't really want to come forward any more than it is. So it just wants to spring back if I pull it forward. So probably not going to display it with the hood up because, I don't know, kind of wants to just keep springing around. I like that detail's there. You can see that even this green has that mottled printing on it as well. As someone who has a bit of sewing experience, I do not like sewing tiny things. It's really fussy trying to get tiny little pieces of fabric to behave. So I'm always really impressed when I come across soft goods components on action figures that have just a lot of detail. I know technically there's not a lot of fabric or a lot of thread stitching here, but it's just tiny stitching and I'm always really impressed. We've got some interesting things going on here. This separate section, if I move his arm out, we can kind of see that it overlaps here onto the sleeve. It's not even just sort of a simple tunic. We've got this section coming over and joining onto the right sleeve and overlapping the right side. That's really interesting. Wow, that's so much work. I'm just looking at the printing details and the stitching and how it's fitting the figure. There's a lot going on here. A little bit of a shame that those under pieces are a little bit crinkled, but to be honest, I'm probably going to keep the robe on this one just because of the complexity, and I'm always a little bit worried that some of these are going to rip or somehow become irreparably shifted trying to remove them. I know for review's sake, I should probably take the whole thing off, but this is a figure for my personal collection, and I do try to avoid potentially damaging my toys. I do try to, you know, keep them looking nice and clean, but we're going to have to try a little bit of articulation and perhaps a little bit of an internal look. Also, the edges of this fabric feel like they're kind of a little bit edged in a way, but I think if you are rough with them, they may have the potential to fray. I'm just looking at sort of the edges, particularly around the sleeves. So I don't want to potentially ladder or fray the edges of this fabric. It's tidier than some fabrics I've seen, some of the Vader cloaks out there. You can even start getting the little black bits of fluff as the fabric starts to kind of wear at the edges, even when you're just lightly handling the toy. I'm not getting that here. I'm not getting fluff coming off on my hands, but I am just aware that this is a raw edge, so I'm just not going to stress the edges of the fabric because it does look so nice and tidy straight out of the box. So I'm going to try and lift it up as best I can so we can take a closer look at some of the painting details underneath. And I'm just going to get him to raise his arms here for a bit. And we'll see how much we can raise this up. So I guess if you really, really wanted to, we have got some printing and weathering on his chest here. We can see that that sort of silver forging detail is repeated here on his chest with some weathering, and we've got his sort of ammo pouches here as an accessory on his chest. We've got separate components here from the chest and the sort of ab part, so just being very, very careful. I can articulate him here while I've got his robe up. I can demonstrate that, and we've got that belt there, and we can see the little fabric sort of nylon webbing that we've got to hold on his original sort of blue and black clone trooper fabric elements here. So they've fitted in pretty tight. The sort of belt that they have used for these components has cut in really close underneath the plastic belt. So this isn't really going to move. I think if you are really, really careful, you might be able to adjust it side to side, but it's pretty good in terms of its placement. Just the fact that the way it's been put into the box, mine has folded a little bit, and we can see those pouches a little bit more clearly there. Some nice detail sculpting on the belt, but he does look very clean from this side. I notice looking down his back, I don't see any weathering down his legs. Very clean, but I guess that is why he's wearing his robe. It's going to cover him up. Looking at the front, we can see that the weathering, we have a little bit of it on the chest, looking up under there, but it generally starts from the belt down. I don't see any weathering on the belt. So we've got weathering on the codpiece, on the thighs, little bit on the knees, the shins, and then, as you would expect, a lot of weathering on the boots. I know weathering is a really touchy subject for some collectors. Sometimes it looks really, really good. Sometimes it looks like molds or something. This one, I'm a bit mixed on. There are certain elements. This one up here, I think looks really interesting. It's got a really, really fine printed texture. But down here, it's almost like I can just make out the dots in sort of the printing that they have used to apply it on the boots. So the artistic and more particular collectors may want to have a go at weathering this themselves if they don't like that appearance. Personally, I don't customize my Black Series or my TVC figures. I collect them as they are, but I don't hate it. I just, sometimes I think it could be, I don't know, perhaps a little bit more even or something. It just kind of looks a bit spotty. It's interesting. I do like the withering on the legs though. I think it looks a little bit more like withering. I think perhaps because this pattern is just isolated to the boots, it's just standing out. Like he's got sort of like leopard print boots or something. It's just kind of standing out. I think if it was more of a graduating up the leg, I think it would perhaps not stand out as well. And then we have some very tidy printing with some tally sort of hash marks here. And there again on his other leg. Really, really tidy printing here. We've got a little bit of that classic Clone Trooper blue on his knees there, with just a tiny bit of withering at the edges. You can kind of see there. And we can see some of those articulation points. I'm going to check those out in a minute. And we've got a little bit of withering going on here down the side as well. It's like different colors. It's almost like a little bit more reddish. I thought it was maybe catching a reflection, but yeah, that is withering down the side. Let's take a look at the other side. Get that out of the way just very carefully. And we've got a little bit more withering down that thigh as well. Again, it doesn't really continue down the back. We've got it just down the front and the side here. Very cool. And if I pull up his arms a little bit, we can see the withering here. So we've got withering on that shoulder bell, some tiny bit on the bicep armor, and here on the forearms, on the inner forearms. On the outside, it looks a little bit more clean because we've got that fabulous Captain Rex blue running down and sort of a withered around the edges. And then we've got more tally marks there, and sort of on here it looks like it's cut out of the blue, and here it looks like that might be painted over the top, because these ones look like plastic, this one looks like paint. So we've got slightly different sort of finishes here. It's kind of interesting because on this, the hand is black, so the whole armor piece has been painted white, so the tally marks can't be the base color plastic. So we've got those painted on the top. This piece, it looks like it is made out of this plastic because of the way it is at the hinge. We can just kind of see the white going down into the hinge, so it's interesting. But they look pretty uniform, even though I know that there is two very subtle different sort of methods here. But very cool. And then the other arm, if we can get this one up. So many details to go over this figure. I was so excited to get it in person. Okay, trying to be very careful with the cloth cape here. So again, we've got some withering all the way up on that shoulder bell, bicep. I don't see the same kind of withering on his elbow piece here, just the blue. And then we've got some on that inner, just kind of starting with the dark colored tally marks there on his forearm armor. And then we've got those white ones there across the back. And they cut into the sculpted detail of his shin armor here. And then we've got the painted tally marks there on the back of his hand. So much paintwork going on here, and half of it's covered by the robe, which is really, really cool. We've got some really interesting articulation here on the arm as well. We've got those pins there, a little bit different to some of the other figures I have from the Bad Batch series, but goodness, so much going on. I'm just going to see if I can get a little bit up higher. See if I can pull this up. We can check out the withering on the other side of the chest. I think that's about as high as I'm going to be able to go without really moving the cloak. We can see that withering going all the way up there. Okay, lots of paintwork there, and it was all mostly hidden by his cloak in the box. So I'm going to move that down. Just taking a last look at sort of the withering. Going to move this down so that we can do take a little bit of a closer look at some of his articulation. Generally speaking, sometimes the robes can affect the way that these things move a little bit. That chest box, sort of ammo pouches here, kind of sticking the robe out a little bit. So he looks a little bit bigger through the chest, particularly with the robe over the top. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's one of those figures where you're going to, well, I'm going to be sort of playing around with the posing and getting it to look just right before I put it on permanent display, because yeah, shifting this around, I can already see the sort of fabric shifting and bunching, and yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. You can see just a little bit of the sort of ammo pouch plastic strap here on the shoulder. You can just see it there next to his neck and at the start of the blue of his shoulder. So I'm just going to put his arms back to where they were before, so we can go all the way out to the side. Oh, that's a nice swing. There's some good movement there. I like that. Not too hard, and we go all the way out to the side. Can't expect much more than that because of those Clone Trooper shoulder bells, and the fabric is going to restrict movement, but I'm quite happy with that. So let's take a look at his elbows, because we've got this sort of two-part pins. So we can see the articulation there. I have to say this is a little bit of an ugly join, which is a little bit sad. Usually the undersuits of Clone Troopers provide really good sort of hiding places for the articulation, but that's just a little bit of a weird gap. Makes me think more of like some articulation in Lego where you end up with these gaps. It's a little bit ugly, but from the back, mostly from the front, I don't see that quite as bad. I know that you are working with some limitations because we have got these extra elbow pieces that are just kind of getting in the way. Looks a little bit better if I just articulate at that lower pin and try and keep the elbow piece straight with the upper arm. That's a much tidier articulation, but to go all the way around, we end up with that gap there. But that looks better. And we've got sort of that rotation. Looks a little bit plain from the inside. We don't have any weathering or any blue. So I do like the way it looks like that, particularly if we line up the blue stripe with that shoulder there as well. That looks tidy. For the hand, we've got quite a standard sort of round grip there with his hand. And I think it's just, I don't see, we've got a little bit backwards and forwards, but this hand plate kind of hits. So we just get a little bit of movement like that, but plenty round and round, which is good. So I'm expecting the same sort of thing on the other side. We might have a little bit more limitation because of the fabric robes. Not too bad. And fairly good swing. We're going to have that same issue with the elbow, so I'm just going to check it out here. Looks pretty nice when we just articulated that lower pin, not the upper pin. And same sort of thing with this hand. Not too much. Let's see. Side to side. Very minimal. Just a little bit there. And we have a trigger finger pose for this hand, which is interesting because he's going to hold two blasters, but this one doesn't really have a trigger finger. This one does. So it'll be interesting to see how easy we can pose those accessories in his hands. So we've got pretty good articulation with his head. Oh, some very deep articulation forward. That's kind of fun. Can go all the way down. A little bit stiff side to side. But we get there. Kind of creaks when I go this way. But yeah, because of this, all this fabric around his neck, it's going to be a little bit hard to do too much posing. And then, of course, before we saw that he had that upper sort of mid-chest articulation. If I move this up, we can see that you can move at the waist. And let's see, I don't know if I see any of that sort of top of the thigh articulation. Let's see if I can get a grasp and see if I can twist. a little bit. Yes, it's very stiff. Just underneath there, so I can sort of tip that thigh, if I can get this out of the way. Can do a little bit of outward rotation with his thigh plate there. It's very stiff though, but his legs can come up to about there if I rotate that piece out to the side. Yep, it's very stiff. We're not getting a huge amount of sort of sitting position flex there in his hips. And we've got those 2 pin joints here for his leg. So we get that black hinge visible there. If I move the top one. Oh, that's very stiff, that bottom one. But we've got, because we can get quite a range of movement, because we've got those 2 articulation points, we can get his heel quite high. But I find I like my figures to be sturdy, and I like the way that legs look with the knee plates all in line. I generally find I'm going to be standing them straight-legged on my shelf. And let's check out the ankles. So I mentioned earlier that when I got him out of the box, he was just a little bit wonky. And his ankles are very tight. I'm not getting a little bit of movement here, and that's about it. Got a little bit side to side, but there's something about him that's just a little bit hard to pose. I've been playing around with it for a little bit now, so I can get him a little bit better to stand up. It's not a heavy cloak, so I wasn't expecting him to be a little bit unsteady. I think sometimes you've just got to really work around with the articulation to get these figures to kind of really stand up straight. There we go. He feels a lot more steady now that I've been sort of tweaking his legs a little bit there. So, taking a look at the figure, his articulation, his paint job, lots of details to go over there, I'm very sorry. Let's take a closer look at his blasters. We'll get some posing going, and then I'll do my final thoughts. Rex came with 2 of the sort of very standard Clone Trooper blaster pistol. They look pretty much flat black, no sort of metallic finish, no weathering or anything like that. They look pretty much identical. I'm going to test them in his hands. We'll see how the grip holds, and then I'm going to try perhaps his left-handed one in a holster and see how easy it is to get that in there. So let's go with his standard hand first. So I'm hoping, because this has a fairly large trigger loop there, this won't be too hard to get into his hand. We've got kind of a tight grip, and this does flare out at the bottom, so sometimes this can be a little bit of a pain. See if I can wiggle that past his grip there. Gonna get that in his finger. Okay. I know it's a black glove holding a black blaster, but that does fit in there. There we go. The finger fits in there nicely. Perhaps a little bit more clearer this way. I don't have quite the same black on black issue there. That looks pretty cool. But of course, Rex uses 2 blasters, so let's try his other hand. Now we don't have a trigger finger here, so this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. And this hand wants to move a little bit more than the other one does. This is going to be a little bit tricky. I don't like stressing my figures out too much. So I'll see if I can show the grip here a little bit better. So we don't have a finger, so he's kind of just gripping it around the base there. Doesn't look quite as cool as the other hand, but if you want to pose him with 2 blasters, there we go. There's that one versus that one. So if we were to pose him, say with his blaster pistols, we can sort of pose them up, I guess. We'll see how well I can get him to just hold them down here like this. It's not too bad. I think sometimes it's kind of funny that we kind of get a very stock standard hand grips between figures, even though they may not necessarily hold a blaster or a lightsaber. They always seem to have the same sort of grip. But yeah, not too bad to get them in there. It always just makes me a little bit worried because the hands rotate and this grip is kind of tight. Let's see if I can get that one out. Okay, so we're going to get his arm out of the way. Just going to see, I may not get this one out again, how well we're going to fit that blaster in this little pouch here, this holster. If you get your arm out of the way. Okay. Oh, it's a bit of a tight fit. Oh, yeah. Okay. We can get that in there. Is that just going to stop there? I feel like that should just sit in a little bit better while I push. I think that's where it's going to stop. I can just sort of see the bottom of it poking out the bottom there, but that's about as tight in as I can manage on this particular figure. So we've got that blaster pistol holstered in here, which is pretty much going to disappear when I put his robe back down like that. Actually, I'm kind of curious, how hard is this going to be to get this back out? Is it going to be easier? Okay, phew. I was a little bit worried because that it was a little bit of a tight fit. I thought I might be really struggling to get that back out because, you know what, I think I want to pose him with two blasters. Okay, classic Captain Rex. Let's see how easy it is to get this back in the second time. Gotta push. His hand really wants to move. Okay, see if I can get this in. Go back in. That's so stiff. Okay. Phew. Did I get that in? Kind of. There we go. It's a very tight fit. There. And let's see how well we can get this back on. Yeah, I like that the helmet fits back on really nicely. So personally, I think the helmet balances out that fabric component so much better there. And we'll just get him to stand up straight. There we go. I think it's a cool face sculpt, but I think he looks so much better with the helmet on. And personally, I like it with the visor up. I like just the blue paint scheme of Captain Rex's helmet. The visor is kind of cool. That's how they've got him on the box art, but I think that this looks just a little bit cooler, just a bit more iconic Captain Rex there. And I think the helmet helps keep that fabric component in place around his neck. We can sort of see the hood at the back there. It's kind of a little bit more kept out of the way. And then we've got a little bit of the cowl neck fabric just peeking out here. And I think overall it just sort of balances the figure out a little bit better because we do have a lot of fabric up around the neck and head there. So I think that that just looks a little bit better. And of course I will spend a little bit of time working with the pose, just trying to get it a little bit more finessed. You know, you can always spend quite a while getting the poses of these figures just right before sort of adding them to your permanent display. And yeah, generally I like to take my time. I'll probably post up some pictures here of some slightly better poses that I have spent some time working on. But overall, this is a very detailed figure and I'm so happy to finally have him in person and out of the packaging. There's a lot of detail going on here. And yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of articulation where we can see the pins from the side, but I know that there is a little bit of restriction when you're dealing with certain types of Star Wars armor and where just sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes modern sculpting works with this a little bit better. I know that this elbow plate is possibly restricting it, so they've put the pins within the black section, but it just means that if you're going to do some of those slightly more wider poses, we're going to get some gaps in the back of the articulation and around the knees. But overall, I think he's really cool. Obviously that helmet is such a highlight of the sculpt with the detail. It's so classically Rex. And I think this battle damaged sort of detail is going to look really cool next to my other Bad Batch 6-inch figures, because the Bad Batch in general have very weathered and very detailed Clone Trooper variant armor. So I think he fits in really well with that aesthetic, and I'm going to join them on the shelf. I know he is not a official member of the Bad Batch, but he does appear so many times throughout the animated series. I'm really happy that he is part of the Black Series 6-inch lineup, so I can add him to my shelf. We haven't had very many new Black Series figures from the Bad Batch. I'm especially hoping that we will see perhaps some pipeline reveals of some Season 3 characters and figures. There are some characters in there I really want in 6-inch figure form, particularly Hemlock and Emery. I need those for my Bad Batch collection, so fingers crossed we'll have those on store shelves in the near future. I want to flesh out my collection from this fabulous animated series, and I don't think I'm really quite emotionally ready for the series to be over yet. Fingers crossed, maybe we will get an announcement of something new in the pipeline from Lucasfilm Animation on May 4th, or at least we won't have to wait too long to find out what we will have to replace this awesome show. So there you go. That was my unboxing and chat about this fabulous Black Series 6-inch clone Captain Rex figure from the Bad Batch series. I'm going to spend some time posing him because I think he just looks so cool. There is just so much going on here. I know this was a longer video, so I really thank you so much for hanging out with me while I have some fun with my Star Wars toys. I really do enjoy sharing my love of Star Wars and collecting with fellow fans online, so thank you so much for watching. I'll have other Bad Batch Black Series 6-inch figures that I have unboxed recently linked down below if you want to see some of those, and I've got some more coming up very shortly, so do subscribe for notifications. I am sharing daily Star Wars unboxing videos, so I'd love for you to join me as I go through my Star Wars collecting adventure. Lots of fun stuff coming up very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next video, and as always, may the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.